Hi everyone, I'm Amy Goldman from Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. I co-lead WHONDRS with James Stegan, and I co-lead the ICON Science Cooperative with James and with Sujata Imani. I'm excited to join you today to talk about an approach to doing science that can be applied across disciplines. I'll speak about one particular sampling and modeling campaign as an example of this approach in practice, but what I want to suggest up front is, as you listen, consider what this approach would be like in your discipline or your specific projects. My goal here is not to delve deep into our specific science objectives for this campaign. It's to share this approach and our experiences with you so that you can use any or all parts to meet your own needs. So with that in mind, I want to start with a thought experiment. And I know this is a recording, so it isn't exactly interactive, but we're going to try. So let's take a moment and sort of come back to our own minds and bring to the front of your mind your research, your science, the kind of work you like to do. Now that we have that in our minds, I want you to ask yourself this question, and you don't need to have an immediate answer. What motivates your approach to research? We're not asking here about what motivates your technical or scientific objectives. This is a higher level question. Are there specific core values or broad goals driving the way that you choose to do your work? The premise I'm proposing is that how we approach our work is just as important as the measurements we obtain, the models we use, or the discoveries we make. And often we only consider the scientific technical what of our work. Today, I'd like to focus on two concepts that are key motivators to my work and that I think many of you will connect with: the pursuit of mutual benefit and transferable knowledge. By mutual benefit, I mean outcomes that meet the needs of both the core science team and the needs of stakeholders interested in and/or impacted by the work. By transferable knowledge, I mean new understanding of concepts, mechanisms, dynamics, etc., that apply across systems and are more than case studies of individual locations and times. Mutual benefit and transferability are broad goals for many people and wrap up a lot of other individual motivators in them. I've listed just a few examples here, like equity, maximizing impact, inclusion, resource sharing, efficiency, and enhanced prediction. So if we continue with our thought experiment and say that you do want your work to have mutual benefit and to generate transferable knowledge, then I have another question. How do you design your research approach to facilitate outcomes that are mutually beneficial and transferable? How do you chart a course that links how you do research to these kinds of outcomes? I would propose that to do this well requires intentional design of how we operate as scientists. ICON has emerged as a framework to meet this need. It guides the intentional design of any project motivated by the pursuit of mutual benefit and transferable knowledge. The letters in ICON stand for integrated, coordinated, open, and networked, and we'll dive into those in a moment. This framework is a helper. It's a tool. It's for projects that say mutual benefit and transferable knowledge are important to our team. But how do we accomplish that? I'm going to go through the definitions of each of the ICON principles at a high level, and then I'll go through them more fully with an example of ICON in practice. ICON relies on pursuing these principles with intentionality by design, but it does not require doing each of these at maximum capacity. Each project needs to decide what makes the most sense for their own goals. So for I, we are talking about intentionally integrating across disciplines and scales. For C, this is intentionally coordinating with consistent protocols and methods to enable transferability. This is not simply having interoperable data. This is thinking about how those data were actually produced to create information that can be combined down the line. The O is for intentionally open and fair, bindable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable throughout the research lifecycle, from ideation to publication, which means we aren't talking just about what you do with your data or papers when you have them, but about being open much earlier in the process. And then N is about intentionally networked, whereby research is designed and or implemented with a broad range of stakeholders to ensure mutual benefit. This can happen in a variety of ways, and there are, of course, many kinds of stakeholders. A key component is that there is real engagement so that the research is being informed by stakeholder needs and not an assumption of what the stakeholders want. This is an important part of avoiding parachute science. I'm going to use a specific research campaign now as an example of ICON in practice to make these concepts more tangible. And as I said at the beginning, the goal here is for you to consider what you can take and apply in your own work. So this research campaign is part of the PNNL River Corridor Science Focus Area project, and the sampling is being implemented through WHONDRS. We refer to the campaign as ICON-ModEx, and we're currently right in the middle of it. The broad goal is to understand and predict sediment respiration as a key but uncertain contributor to river corridor biogeochemical function. This campaign was designed and implemented to use ICON principles from the very start. It was also built to integrate models with experiments in an iterative loop, known to many in the ESS community as ModEx. In the ICON-ModEx campaign, we used open access data from resources like GlowRich and WHONDRS to build AI models to predict sediment respiration. We then identified sampling locations in the continental US using the model output based on several goals, including reducing model uncertainty. Through WHONDRS, we've been crowdsourcing sample collection and sensor deployment across the US on a rolling basis. As the samples come in, we are generating new data that's then being used to test the model predictions, improve the models, and generate new predictions. This cycle repeats as we generate new samples, new predictions, and improve the model. So how does this connect to ICON? As I said, the ICON-ModEx campaign was designed from the start to align with ICON principles, because when we decided that the what of the science was AI and sediment respiration, we also decided the how was pursuing mutual benefit and transferable knowledge, which meant using ICON as a framework. So we're going to go through each letter in ICON and talk about examples from this campaign. I want to make it really clear, though, the examples we're talking about are not the only way to do ICON. They are just one example of using this approach. ICON can be accomplished in many ways, and it does not require crowdsourcing to succeed. So we'll start with integrated. In ICON, integrated refers to science that is designed to intentionally integrate across disciplines and scales. In the ICON-ModEx campaign, we integrated open data across disciplines and further integrated those data with AI models. In this way, we're using open data to enhance transdisciplinary integration. For the new data we're generating, in addition to measuring respiration in laboratory incubations, we're deploying dissolved oxygen sensors, collecting water and sediment chemistry data like ions, total nitrogen, and dissolved organic carbon, analyzing the organic matter composition of the water and sediment using ultra-high resolution mass spectrometry, preserving water filters and sediment and RNA later for next-generation microbial sequencing, and measuring physical characteristics like grain size and mineralogy. These are intentional choices to tie together chemical, biological, and physical data types. We are further integrating methodologies by using these data with the AI models. We're also aiming for wide spatial coverage across the continental US, covering many different biomes. And in addition to single point in time samples, we're doing time series sampling for 1 year at 3 NEON sites to target different temporal scales. This integrated approach allows us to both characterize variation in respiration and elucidate physical, chemical, and biological mechanisms governing that variation across the continental US. For coordinating with consistent protocols and methods to enable transferability, we send out sampling kits to the crowdsourced collaborators around the country, and they use the kits to collect samples, deploy sensors, and collect metadata. They send the samples back to us at PNNL, and we generate the data following established protocols from WHONDRS, the Environmental Molecular Sciences Laboratory, EMSL, and the Joint Genome Institute, JGI. We also publish our data following established protocols, and I'll touch on that in the next slide. Being coordinated generates data that can be combined within and among sampling campaigns, which in this ICON-ModEx effort allows us to learn about how mechanisms governing sediment respiration change across biomes, seasons, and years. To be open throughout the research lifecycle, we held 2 open discussion calls in December and February that we advertised widely across social media, message boards, mailing lists, and through direct emails. In these calls, we shared our preliminary study ideas with the people who joined, and we gathered their feedback, which I'll touch on in the next slide. As part of the second call, we also distributed our draft sampling protocol for comment. We posted recordings of both calls to YouTube for folks who couldn't join. We'll also be publishing our data as early as possible and prior to using it for any manuscripts. We publish our data on ESS Dive, and as part of creating fair data and being coordinated, as I mentioned on the earlier slide, we follow the ESS Dive reporting formats to structure our data sets. In other studies, we've also pursued crowdsourced analysis and writing as part of being open throughout the research lifecycle, which might be something we incorporate into the ICON-ModEx effort, as it can increase the diversity of perspectives that work together to develop knowledge from the data and models. To be networked with stakeholders for mutual benefit, a primary focus was on designing the 2 open discussion calls I mentioned in the last slide so that we could maximize feedback opportunities and make study design choices to align with that feedback. We used a series of poll questions in addition to discussion and written feedback to provide opportunities for more voices to be heard, since we had over 50 participants on each call. This slide has an example of one of the poll questions from the December call on the left and the February call on the right. In December, we asked which sediment data types would be high value enough to collect even if it caused fewer locations to be sampled. People were able to write in answers and upvote and downvote existing answers. Based on that input and the resources we have available, we created a list of data types that we presented at the February call, and we asked if people felt the list met the project's goals and would benefit others beyond the project, and asked them to write in items they felt were missing. People could again upvote and downvote answers. After the February call, we added more measurement types based on the feedback with the aim of maximizing the usefulness of the final dataset and project outcomes to more people. This also had benefits to the science we'll do with this ICON-ModEx campaign. That is, being open and networked early in the research lifecycle resulted in the inclusion of additional data types, which will allow evaluation of new questions, such as what molecular properties drive variation in active microbial biomass, and how that, in turn, influences respiration rates. Now that we've covered these examples of ICON-ModEx in practice, I want to bring you back around to the definition of ICON that we started with. ICON is a framework. It's a helper. It's a tool. It's for projects that say mutual benefit and transferable knowledge are important to our team, but how do we accomplish that? I hope you heard some ideas today that sparked interest in using ICON and potentially merging it with ModEx. There are many ways to use ICON principles, and there isn't a singular right way. In this research effort, we linked ICON to ModEx, but you might think about other concepts or approaches you can link to ICON to create something powerful. If you want to learn more about ICON-ModEx, you can visit the ICON-ModEx page on the WHONDRS website. If you want to learn more about ICON, you can reach out to the ICON Science Cooperative. You can also read the special issue from Earth and Space Science that has crowdsourced articles from across the geosciences about ICON science. I would also encourage you to reach out to me with questions, ideas, and comments. Thank you.